Welcome to another episode of Erik Whiskey Studies, and in this video I'm going to do a review of the Bowmore 21-year-old Aston Martin Edition Islay Single Malt Scotch Whisky. So this video is part of a series that I'm doing in studying for the Council of Whiskey Masters, in which I'm doing distillery profiles. So we're going to look at the history of Bowmore Distillery, and then I'll give you my notes on this bottle. Bowmore Distillery is located on the Isle of Islay, an island on the Inner Hebrides. The distillery lies on the southeastern shore of Loch Indal and is one of the oldest in Scotland. In 1779, Bowmore Distillery was founded by David Simpson, and it becomes the oldest distillery on Islay. In 1837, Bowmore Distillery was sold to James and William Mutter of Glasgow. In 1892, after additional construction, the distillery became a Bowmore Distillery Company Limited, a consortium of British businessmen. In 1925, Bowmore Distillery was taken over by J.B. Sheriff and Company. In 1929, Bowmore Distillery was taken over by Distillers Company Limited, also known as DCL. In 1950, William Gregor & Son took over Bowmore Distillery. In 1963, Stanley P. Morrison buys Bowmore Distillery and forms Morrison Bowmore Distillers Limited. In 1989, Japanese Suntory buys a 35% stake in Morrison Bowmore Distillers Limited. In 1993, Black Bowmore is launched. In 1994, Suntory takes complete control of Bowmore Distillery. The remainder of Bowmore history from 1999 to 2019 is a long series of special releases. 1999, Bowmore Darkest, finished 3 years in Oloroso barrels, is launched. In 2000, Bowmore Dusk, with 2 years finished in Bordeaux cask, is launched. In 2001, Bowmore Dawn, with 2 years finished in port pipes, is launched. In 2003, a trilogy of wood expressions is released: the 1964 Bourbon, 1964 Fino, and 1964 Oloroso. In 2005, a 16-year-old 1989 Bowmore Bourbon cask is released, and a 34-year-old 1971 Bowmore is released. In 2006, a 16-year-old Bowmore 1990 Oloroso and 1968 37-year-old was released. In 2007, an 18-year-old Bowmore is introduced. In 1991, 16-year-old Port and Black Bowmore are released. In 2008, White Bowmore and 1992 Vintage Bordeaux Finish are launched. In 2009, Gold Bowmore, Maltman Selection, Lamrig, and Bowmore Tempest are released. In 2010, a 40-year-old and Vintage 1981 are released. In 2011, Vintage 1982 and new batches of Tempest and Lamrig are released. In 2012, 100 Degrees Proof, Springtide, and Vintage 1983 are released for duty-free. In 2013, the Devil's Cask, a 23-year-old port cask matured, and Vintage 1984 are released. In 2014, Black Rock, Gold Reef, and White Sands are released for duty-free. In 2015, new editions of the Devil's Cask, Tempest, and the 50-year-old are released, as well as Mizunara Cask Finish. In 2016, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old travel retail exclusive, and Bowmore Vault Edition are released, as well as the final batch of Blackmore Bowmore. In 2017, Number 1 is released together with 3 new expressions for travel retail. In 2018, Vintner's Trilogy is launched. In 2019, Bowmore's Vault Edition Peat Smoke, a 20-year-old for duty-free, and the 36-year-old Dragon Edition are released. The Bowmore Aston Martin Master Selection 21-year-old Single Malt Scotch Whisky. This is a limited edition single malt created in collaboration between Ron Welsh, Master Blender, and Marek Reichman, Chief Creative Officer for Aston Martin. It is aged in first fill Pedro Jimenez and Sherry Oloroso casks. It's bottled at 51.8% alcohol by volume. Only 12,000 bottles were released. I paid around $300. It is now selling for as much as $500 to over $1,000. So this is an absolutely superb whiskey. I know a little challenging to get a hold of and a little bit expensive. I still found a few sites that had it for around $350, but most of the retailers where you could get it were closer anywhere between $500 and $1,000 and even more, which is absolutely insane in terms of prices. But this is a very limited edition and a lot of people are out for it, particularly since it's also sort of a prestigious bottle, being, you know, Aston Martin, associated with Aston Martin and all that, James Bond and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not the first to review this. Rob over at Whiskey in the Six reviewed this and he absolutely loved it. And I gotta say, I totally agree with him. This is an absolutely superb whiskey. It is a whiskey that really, something similar to this should be part of the core range of Bowmore. They should have something in their line that's a little bit more readily available. You know, even if it's not 21 year olds, even if it was 18 or 16 or something like that fact, but with these sort of sherry casks and this intensity and this high ABV and all that, you know, non-chill filtered, no added coloring, something for the whiskey geek in their profile. Because now the reality is, if you look at the core range, they're all, you know, 40 to 43% ABV and just not all that impressive. They're nice whiskeys, but they just sort of okay. There's nothing that impressive. They need a whiskey, something similar to this, something that's in this ballpark on their core range that's more readily available. So on the nose, I get fig, dates, raisins, but it's like very concentrated fig, dates, raisins in like in a compote form. Now, you notice I just put 2 drops of water on this. Without the water, this whiskey is very tight. It's very closed. It's sort of like someone folding their arms and doesn't want to talk to you. And to get it to open up and really speak to you, 2 teaspoons of water and it opens up really nice. I tried it on ice. I didn't like it on ice. Just 2 teaspoons of water. Some honey, brown sugar, dark caramels, chocolate, a little bit of coffee, some vanilla, a lot of spice. I'm gonna say cinnamon, nutmeg. There's a little bit of an herbal note, like a black licorice or anise herbs. Wow. There's a slight tar note, just a hint of tar. Dark chocolate. And it just wafts really nice. You can tell, just even on the nose, you're not smelling everything all at once. There's like layers even within the nose on this, on the palate. This is a whiskey, you take a sip, and you can sit there for the next 10 minutes, still, literally 10 minutes, still tasting it. The development is absolutely phenomenal. Dried black fruit notes up front, then into some dark chocolate, coffee, caramel, a little bit of honey. There's a little bit of saltiness there. The anise or anise, black licorice notes shows up on the back end with just a hint of tar. Any peat and smoke is really interwoven really well. As I'm talking now, I'm still tasting it. It has an insanely long finish. I was enjoying this the other night while reading a book. And it's one of my favorite experiences to read a book about whiskey. Sit there with the light on and the candles on and all that. Just sit there and you can take a sip and you can set off to the side, and as you're reading page after page, you're still tasting it without returning to the glass. The finish on this is absolutely, I think, what really sells this whiskey. It is nice and silky once you add a little bit of water to it. Just an absolutely superb whiskey. What would I give it in terms of a score? I'm gonna go a solid 93 points. A solid 93 points, and undoubtedly this is a bottle that will be on my top 10 for 2022. If you can get one of these bottles for under 400 bucks and you can afford it, I highly recommend picking up a bottle because it is superb. And I want to say, if anybody at Bowmore is watching, we need to see something like this in a core range, something in this ballpark. You really need to up the game on your core range rather than just sort of hitting, the bottom of the barrel, uninformed consumer. Something for us whiskey geeks, someone who really is quite the enthusiast that is looking for something. Because Bowmore has something to offer in that it's not the, sort of smack upside the head peat as their southern neighbors, Ardbeg, Laphroaig, Lagavulin, or even say Kalila, or the Port Charlotte 10, or even some of those heavier peated ones from up north. It's a nice medium level peat that is really gonna fill, I would say, a niche within the peated whiskey category. Alrighty, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you've not yet subscribed, but you like watching my videos, I would greatly appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and stay tuned, because in a live stream following this video, we're gonna have a little quiz on Bowmore Distillery. And until next time, cheers. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.